Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 83 of CBD Talk Podcast. Tonight we have with us someone from here in Colorado. We have Jamie Baumgartner with Panacea Life Sciences. So, welcome, Jamie. Thanks for joining us tonight.
No problem, Don. Glad to be with you.
Now, you guys know that I like science. I just think that really is the thing that sets cannabis apart from a lot of other things is the lack of science, but the benefits and the efficacy of hemp and cannabis. And we just don't have the in the U.S. the science to back it up all the time. So what I really like is that Jamie has a PhD in biochemistry and a background to match everything that I think the hemp industry needs. So how about you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into working with hemp?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I have my PhD in biochemistry, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but also am a voracious puzzle solver. So, doing research and trying to apply that scientific knowledge to solve meaningful problems, health problems, actually is really what drives me along. Following my PhD, I went into industry, decided not to become a professor because I wanted my work to really bring meaningful medications to people in need. And so that's what I've tried to dedicate my career to. So I spent 25 years actually doing drug discovery, drug development. Most recently, I was working for a company called MDS Pharma Services, where I was consulting for about 600 biotechnology companies and pharma companies, helping evaluate late-stage drug candidates and shepherd those into the clinic to try and increase the success rate and efficacy of novel candidates related to central nervous system disorders, CNS, and pain. In 2015, I was working for a small company with a partner of mine up in Fort Collins, where we were doing in vivo proof of concept tests for novel pain medications for companies like AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Merck, and Takeda. We were asked by a Denver-based marijuana company to test marijuana extracts in those same pain models, so the exact same models that a pharmaceutical drug would go through, and to evaluate the effect of that marijuana extract on the ability to serve as an analgesic or a pain reliever. And the company actually pulled out at the last minute, which was unfortunate because we'd already purchased all the materials to run the experiments.
Oh, no.
So we decided, well, yeah, it happens, you know. But I think the good end to the story was we went ahead and ran the study anyway since we already purchased all the materials.
That's fabulous.
And the results blew us away. So what we saw is that for inflammatory pain, that cannabidiol, and luckily through a hemp extract that had very little to no THC, that cannabidiol by itself serves as a great NSAID, which is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. So it works about 10 times better than ibuprofen for acute inflammatory pain. It works great with neuropathic pain. So like if you ever thrown out your back, so that's called neuropathic pain. It doesn't work right away. It takes about 5 days in order for it to work, but it works better than the prescribed medication with no side effects. And the other thing that we saw that was really interesting, and very interesting as a matter of fact, is that you could use a cannabidiol regimen in combination with morphine to get beneficial effects. So when you think about post-operative pain, so you've come out of an operation, you hurt, the doctor gives you Vicodin or OxyContin or something along those lines. Okay. What we saw is that you could take 1/5 to 1/6 the morphine dose while taking cannabidiol to achieve the same amount of analgesia.
Wow. So you continued on with the test anyway, even though the company pulled out because you had bought the materials or
all the materials, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you decide which product to use?
So what we did was we went to the state of, the Colorado government website. And the amount of information you can actually find through the state of Colorado's website is flat out astounding.
Nice.
So what you can do is you can take a look at all the red card holders and what they're issued that red card for and what strains they've been buying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we did is we took the top 10 strains that had a THC cannabidiol type of profile, and that's what we ran in the experiments.
Wow. So you just went and bought the.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just we one of our staff members got a red card and went to the different dispensaries and got material, and that's what we used for the experiments.
So during the experiment, then it was inhalation.
No, so one of the things, unfortunately, a lot of these tests you've actually got to do in what we call an integrated system, meaning it's an in vivo test in rodents. Okay. Now, these tests have been used for 70 years to predict very well about whether that drug is going to have efficacy when you move into the humans.
Okay.
And so, from that standpoint, there's several different ways you can actually administer. Inhalation is problematic when you think about rats.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead, what we did was we did both intraperitoneal, so where you take the mixture and you inject into the gut, which actually has a very nice absorption. We also did PO dosing, which is oral gavage. So you feed the animal the material orally.
Okay, so you extracted it and put it into like a liquid, a tincture or something.
Correct. Just shake it up with alcohol, and then take that alcohol, boil off the alcohol, and then reformulate it into the right vehicle.
Okay, yeah, because I was just curious how what method you used on that. So
yeah, well, I mean, so one of the things that that I think the industry understands now is that 5 years ago we didn't worry about what we call bioavailability. How much of that material that you ingest gets into your bloodstream? Okay. If you get no drug material into your bloodstream, you have no effect. So 5 years ago, everybody was smoking the material, and inhalation and smoking are a great way to actually get the drug into your system. When you actually take it orally, both in rats, dogs, and in humans, the bioavailability goes down by about 90%.
Yeah,
okay,
because of the way that it is metabolized.
Absorption and metabolized. So, cannabidiol and THC are not very water soluble. And so it has to run a whole gauntlet or obstacle course in order to get into your bloodstream. So the first one is to be able to survive the acidic environment of the stomach. Second is to be absorbed in the small intestine. And third is trying to evade liver metabolism. So your liver is built to destroy any foreign material. So between those three elements, you get about 90% of the material destroyed before it actually gets into your bloodstream.
So how does Panacea Life get around that?
So that's a great question. And hopefully I'll be able to answer it without divulging too many company secrets.
We don't want any,
well, and also I want to make sure that it's understandable. But picture cannabidiol as a three-dimensional structure. Okay, picture it as a beach ball, if you will, with all those different colors. Certain colors are going to be water soluble. Certain colors are going to be not water soluble, oil soluble. Okay. It's what we would call the polar surface area of the molecule. Okay. And there's other characteristics of that beach ball that you can ascribe values to it. So pharma has done a great job of taking molecules like this, that similar molecular size, similar beach ball type of characteristics, and they've done a lot of work in terms of different vehicles they can add, different surfactants, different formulations, different ways to actually get that molecule in the solution so it has higher bioavailability. So what we did is we went into the literature, took a look at like molecules, and how did pharma solve that problem? Okay. Now, we don't have the perfect answer right now. Okay. But what we did is we took a like molecule, and then we effectively modeled that with respect to cannabidiol. Well, I'm going to close that. So that way I don't have to hear people trying to get hold of me. So we took like molecules and we said, how did they solve it? And one of the ways they solved it is by using surfactants to help the molecule become more soluble and become more easily absorbed, and potentially protect against liver metabolism. And the fact is that by using this approach, like molecules would achieve greater, like 3 to 6 fold greater bioavailability than just naked molecule by itself.
So is it still going through the digestive system, or is it bypassing that and just getting absorbed
Nope.
into the body? Still going
No,
through that digestive.
still going through the digestive system. I mean, so we played around with trying to use transdermal patches,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think about whether we want to have inhalation, whether it's like an
Or
inhaler,
nano, or
nanoparticles.
mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so the things about nano is a very common element in this industry. I think a lot of people misuse it as well as misunderstand it.
Mm-hmm.
What those nanoparticles really are is using a technology. Okay, sonication is a great way. So if you think about the dentist cleaning their instruments with that high whining pitch, you can use that sonic vibration to break the molecule up to solubilize it into a stable emulsion, meaning that it's not going to separate over time. And that's really what the value of the nanoparticles are, to try and increase the water solubility of cannabidiol or THC. Now, if you add a surfactant to that and you add lipid molecules, you really greatly increase the cannabidiol solubility, which helps in its absorption. And again, we think with the surfactant, it helps protect a little bit from the liver metabolism. So we could wave hands all day long about why it works. Okay. But the important part is that, again, with like molecules, we see up to a 6-fold increase in bioavailability. And that's really what's important for us. Now, the one thing, yeah, go ahead.
When you did that study, were you using a surfactant, or was that before you did that?
No, we were using a vehicle that had a surfactant in it.
Oh, okay. So in the study, you were doing that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And it's, there are a common set of vehicles that you use that have surfactants that are, that do not affect the results of the behavioral endpoint you're trying to measure. And so we use a different vehicle surfactant combination for our in vivo studies than we use for our human or dog-based products. Because
you actually want to help. If you use a certain surfactant, you can actually help increase that efficacy.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And that's purely by increasing the amount of material that gets in your bloodstream or gets across the blood-brain barrier.
Got it. So just let's go over again what you found from the study, the benefits that you found from the study.
So the study that we actually did, we actually did 3 studies before we decided to stop and try and raise funds for moving into the clinic. So the first one was we took a look at acute inflammatory pain. Okay.
So would that be like a broken bone?
No, it'd be like a sprained wrist.
Got it.
Okay, something that's short in duration, can be sharp pain, but it's really inflammatory driven. Okay, and so with respect to that, we ran it head to head with ibuprofen, and what we saw in a dose response relationship is that CBD was 10-fold more potent on a dose relationship than ibuprofen.
And this was oral. This wasn't a salve. This was oral.
This was intraperitoneal injection.
Oh, the peritoneal. Right? Okay.
So it was not a oral or a topical. It was just flat out, let's see if this works. Let's take out the variables of oral bioavailability or how much gets in there. Okay. And so that's one of the reasons why I use IP, is that you don't have to worry about the oral bioavailability.
Yeah.
And so we administered both the control compound, in this case ibuprofen, versus the test article, which would be cannabidiol. And that's how we were able to compare those head to head.
Fabulous. And then the second one?
The second one was a model of neuropathic pain. It's most commonly called the Chung model. Okay. And so it mirrors like if your back goes out. And so what we saw with that is acute dosing. So single dose or double dose of CBD didn't really do anything. Okay. But we continued to study for the course of 1 week. And at 5 days, we saw that cannabidiol completely eradicated the pain sensation, no side effects, and worked better than the commonly prescribed drug called Neurontin. Okay. Or you might have heard of this as being marketed as Lyrica. So the drug name is gabapentin. So gabapentin in this model would only give a 73% or 70% pain reduction. And that's almost at a sedative dose. Okay, so again, cannabidiol here with chronic treatment or chronic dosing addressed the neuropathic pain, whereas gabapentin did not really do that great of a job.
Nice. Yeah. And so just out of curiosity, when you're dosing the rats, is it like once a day or twice a day?
It depends on the paradigm. In this particular case, we're dosing twice a day.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
And then the third one?
Third one is a model of post-operative pain. Okay. So what you do here is you make an incision across the skin of the paw, and you stitch it back up, and then you measure the pain sensation from that. Okay. Now, the cannabidiol, even though we're called Panacea and we think about cannabidiol as being a cure-all, cannabidiol by itself is not strong enough to really treat post-surgical pain.
Okay.
Okay. And so in this study, we did a couple of different things. One was the positive control to show analgesia is morphine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then we had a combination study where we had a medium dose of CBD in conjunction with 1/5 the dose of morphine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what we saw with that combination group is that, again, with a 5 to 6-fold lower morphine concentration, we achieved the same amount of analgesia as morphine by itself at a 5-fold higher dose. Okay. Now, in the rats, you could say, okay, well, that's a rat, right? Again, these models have been used to predict. But one of the things anecdotally that we've seen is that patients that are on tramadol, which is another morphine that's commonly prescribed for people with chronic pain, oftentimes are taking 50 to 75% less tramadol, or they even forget to take it when they're on a medium range dose of CBD. So that's anecdotal, and we've got to go back to the clinic and do clinical studies to really, back that up scientifically.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, people talk about anecdotal, and anecdotal is fabulous because that's what drives the studies. How do you know?
Well, I mean, so like for us, we've got to have some type of rationale when we actually talk to the board about laying out 6 figures to do a human clinical study.
Mm-hmm.
So the preclinical work or the anecdotal information combined give confidence that if we design the study correctly, that we'll get the right outcome. Now, that being said, those studies need to be double-blind crossover studies, and so that way we're not biasing the audience or the participants with respect to what they should expect.
Exactly. And so when you did the studies, and I know that it was on rats,
Yeah.
Was there any indication of side effects on the CBD side?
We didn't see anything. Are you
It's
referring
hard
to?
to ask a rat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the thing is that you can tell whether animals actually have side effects. So one of the things we did do is blood chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see any side effects there. We didn't see any behavioral modifications that indicated there's any distress or any other type of neurological condition that was being triggered by the rats. Okay, so we've done non-GLP safety studies with escalating doses. We've not been able to formulate to a high enough dose to actually see any acute toxicity.
Nice.
Now, there was a report that came out a couple of weeks ago to where a researcher actually did a toxicity study in mice, and they saw 24 hours with very high doses. They saw acute liver toxicity. Now, I've got a lot of questions about that study. First off, mice are not the right species to go into for toxicology studies. But secondly, I would question whether they're really using pure CBD or they had residual solvent that actually would lead to those toxicities.
That's something that that we actually do talk a lot about is on the show is we talk about COAs, we talk about knowing what's in what you're buying.
Right.
And because you can, especially if you're going with high doses and trying to find toxicity, I mean, you could have some sort of, I mean, let's go far, on the extreme. If you have some of the oils coming in from overseas, like in China, where it's being used to remediate heavy metals out of soil.
Right. Well, there's a reason why CBD products have been banned from importation in the United States, just because of that the purity, right? Heavy metals, pesticides. Who knows what else is contained in the radioactivity? I mean, who knows?
Chernobyl. Who knows?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one of the miraculous things about the hemp plant. It will pull everything out of the soil into the plant stem and leaf and bud. So,
so I am curious. So it didn't talk about the source of the oil or anything in the formulation?
No, I mean this. I've got to try and get a preprint or talk to the authors and really get a handle on exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they did try to do, and I applaud them for it, is that they repeated some of the Epidiolex dosing, okay, which is a pure CBD made by GW Pharma, and they were doing.
Is that a pure CBD or is that a synthetic CBD?
I don't know if it's a synthetic or whether they're just purifying out of botanical extracts. I think it's synthetic.
Yeah, and there's
don't quote me on that.
Yeah. So we don't know.
But Don, here's the thing: is that if you take a look at that Epidiolex study, and it's a big body of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to find nighttime reading time to actually go through it, and it's pretty boring stuff, so it'll put you to sleep. But one of the things that's really interesting is that they were using 20 milligrams per kilogram. Okay.
Okay.
So when you think about how much material that is on a daily basis, so I'm about 100 kilos, right? So that's 2 grams of material that I'll be taking every single day.
That's a lot. Okay?
And so, it's not surprising.
First of all, no one can afford that, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty expensive, right? But at the same time, I don't know of any other drug or dietary, whatever you want to call it, FDA. Yeah. I don't know anything else that you'd be taking at that high level and expect to not have any side effects. So it's a little extreme from that standpoint.
Yeah. So, so like you said, one of the things is how pure was the product.
Correct.
And, but, I can see the value in someone literally trying to figure out at what point is there toxicity, at what.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and that's one of the pre-work that usually goes into an IND, investigational new drug application, is what is the safety or therapeutic window? Meaning, what's the first dose that you actually start to see, or concentration you see a biological effect, to when it will kill 50% of the participants taking that particular drug. Okay, can't do that in people, of course. You have to do that in animals. The only information that I've seen for cannabis extracts has a therapeutic ratio of 1,000. Okay, and I can send you the reference for that if you like. But to give you some context, in case you're not used to thinking about therapeutic ratios, heroin has a safety ratio of 3, meaning you get high, and then if you go 3-fold higher than that, you die. Alcohol, about 7. Coffee will kill you if you drink 100-fold more than you need to actually get the caffeine buzz.
Okay, people need to know that coffee will kill you.
Well, I mean,
no, I know.
How many people are going to drink 100 cups of coffee, in a day?
You haven't been to my office before.
Well, I can match you cup for cup. I mean, it's anything taken in high enough amounts is going to have some effect on you, right?
But CBD is 1,000.
Cannabis extracts 1,000. I think CBD is going to be even higher. So when we were evaluating central nervous system acting drugs, I would be over the moon. I mean, absolutely over the moon if we had a safety ratio of 20.
Wow.
Okay, and when you take a look at a majority of the drugs that are commonly prescribed on the market, safety ratios is about 10 to 15. Okay, and so here you're talking about something that's extraordinarily safe based on all the information aside from this one study that we just mentioned.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything that is that safe that has reported treatments for about 100 conditions, ranging from antimicrobial all the way to anti-tumor.
Well, and here's another thing though is, okay, so we've got this safety ratio way up into, outer space area, which is great, but the efficacy does not increase because of the biphasic properties, right? I mean, like, more is not necessarily better when you get to a certain point.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, so one of the things that we think is extraordinarily important is being able to provide consumers or patients, however you want to describe that, better guidance about how much they need to take for what condition.
Yeah.
And right now, I don't care who you are, unless you're GW Pharma talking about Epidiolex, there is very little data that will substantiate how much CBD you need to actually use to treat a sprained ankle or to treat schizophrenia or seizures or something along those lines. Well, Epidiolex has some pretty good information with respect to drug-resistant epilepsy. Okay,
right.
But overall, our industry is really not doing itself a favor by not concentrating on getting better dosage guidance to consumers.
Right, and as you referred to it when we were talking before the show started, science light.
Correct.
But part of the reason that it is science light is because the FDA, if you say, hey, here's dosage, here's this, here's that, then the FDA is going to come and strangle you.
Well, I don't know if they'd strangle you. They might write you. They might write you. No, look, here's the thing. And again, I'm probably not going to win a lot of fans by saying this, but I think it's the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the FDA has been standoffish because they've not been allowed to actually engage in conversation. Mm-hmm. Schedule 1 drug research is really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got to have a Schedule 1 license, and you know the whole drill about how you would actually get hold of material.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So now that this has been somewhat legalized by the Farm Bill,
mm-hmm.
I think the FDA has been uncharacteristically generous about soliciting public opinion.
May 31st, or whatever at the end of May, that was
I've never
200 people. Yeah.
Well, there were 3,400 comments.
Oh, I was talking about the speeches, because I actually have been.
Right.
I saw some of it, and I'm going through the recording and looking at some of it again, and
right.
A lot of great public comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, right? And I've never heard of the FDA actually opening the doors to that level. Okay.
Are you thinking they should go dietary supplement or a different way? Personal preference.
Personal preference is I'd like to see it as a dietary supplement.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's more applications and that people will get benefit from if it's classified as dietary supplement. Mm-hmm. You're also going to get better quality control in terms of the products.
Yes.
Okay.
GMP and
right.
All that. There needs to be some regulation. It's just you can't have the Wild West out here. So.
Well, I mean, so again, if you come back to the FDA and you look at the warning letters that you can see online for what they sent out in 2015, 16, people were putting products on the shelves that didn't have any CBD in them.
I appreciated that.
Or they had too much THC in them, right?
Yeah, I 100% applaud them for doing that, and I would love to see more of that. But that's the thing is, I can see how they're kind of in a quandary. Like, Well,
I mean, so here's the situation, right? So if we go back to the FDA, what they have is they have a lot of anecdotal testimonies, okay? And what they're asking for, what they're pleading for, are true scientific studies that they can say, yes, this is generally recognized as safe.
Well,
yes,
why can't you use the ones from other countries?
You can, as long as they're being submitted, and as long as they've been properly controlled.
Okay.
Right? And the literature is starting to take off exponentially in terms of what you're seeing being published and what studies are there. So it's really hard to try and drink from the fire hose if you're the FDA, get up to speed and have regulations out by July 15th.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm normally not pro-government, but I think that they're doing their best to try and handle a very difficult and complex question. But Don, what we're going to see at the end of the day is that this plant, whether you want to call it cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, cannabis sativa L, industrial hemp, I don't really care. It's probably going to be the richest source of new medications we've ever seen in our lifetime. Maybe 10 lifetimes.
I absolutely love it. It's so great, and that's why I'm excited that the Farm Bill did what it did. Especially with allowing the interstate commerce of it. Transporting things, because you've got states like Colorado that is amazing when it comes to the agriculture, and other states as well. And then you have states that really don't, that they don't have the agricultural background that we do. Some states, and so for farmers to be able to grow this and to be able to sell it, first of all, I'm all pro farm, not pro pharma, but pro farm, and so I love that aspect of it, and it's a great plant to. It's not a difficult plant to really grow, and on top of it, the waste from the plant you can use in so many different ways, from insulation to hempcrete to all sorts of things, and you can use it for biofuels rather than using it for cannabidiol and things like that. But I I just think that national commerce brings it to a different level also, and um, and just truly gets the product to places that maybe would not have the same quality. But that's because I'm really pro Colorado. So.
And that's fine. I mean, so I don't know if you're aware, but we were the company in January who had their hemp seized in Oklahoma.
No,
That's us. So
no, oh my gosh. So
I
what
laugh about
happened
it
with
now.
that?
Okay, so boy, I know we didn't really want to get into that on this podcast, but
No,
so,
people need to know stuff.
so effectively, we were looking for a way that we could get the same quality of hemp and actually had it for the lower cost and also the scale that we needed.
Yes.
So we contracted with a company in Kentucky to bring in 120,000 pounds of hemp.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And so in January, the first shipment came out. Now, Kentucky runs their program a lot differently, and in some ways they do a really cool job, is that the Kentucky Department of Agriculture will certify that hemp, very similar to how they would certify a cotton bale or something along those lines. Okay. And so we put together a big manifest. The transport company called Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma Department of Transportation said, look, we're bringing a truckload of hemp across your state. Nebraska and Kansas said, look, don't do it because we are not equipped to deal with that, and it's just not going to be in your best interest to do it. Oklahoma DOT said, fine, we're good, right? So these gentlemen are transporting about 17,000 pounds of industrial hemp. And again, I can send you the records. It's a big, long document. And about 2 a.m, they were pulled over for allegedly running a stop sign in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, outside of Tulsa. And the police officer was walking alongside the trailer going, is that cannabis that I smell? And so shortly afterwards, the Pawhuska Police Department and District Attorney's Office from Osage County said, biggest marijuana bust, biggest drug bust in Oklahoma State history. Okay. So long story short is the unfortunate thing that happened was that the drivers of the truck were held in prison without being charged for a month. Okay. A month. So we worked diligently to try and get all the charges dismissed and to try and take care of the truck drivers. Now, we didn't hire an attorney for them. They're not our employees to begin with, okay? But we felt a moral responsibility to try and help them in ways that we could. So we paid their mortgages, we paid their car fees in terms of their car payments, and then we worked diligently without putting any political pressure on the district attorney or the local law authorities to try and resolve the situation. So if we get the charges dismissed, these guys would not have to come back to court. They wouldn't have to hire a lawyer and face possible imprisonment. That was our goal. Okay, and we were successful at that standpoint. But as of today, the hemp shipment, and we don't know if it's any good anymore, but it's still being detained in Pawhuska or Sage County. Okay, now the USDA has written them a pretty scalding letter.
Thank you, USDA.
Yeah, I mean, so they're saying you can't inhibit interstate transport like what you were talking about. But here's the situation, and unfortunately, I've had a lot of time to reflect on this, so I've cooler heads will prevail, if you will. Think about it if you're the police officer, okay, and you come up on a truck, and it smells like pot, it looks like pot, so good hemp looks like cannabis, okay? They don't have the field tools to actually discriminate between hemp and marijuana. They don't have the experience reading a manifest, knowing what the definition of industrial hemp is. So I can't really place blame because I don't have the right tools to actually discriminate between hemp and marijuana.
Okay. I will allow that for 5 days.
Okay.
And at that point, within 5 days, you should be able to have it tested. You should be able to contact the state of Kentucky's agricultural department to verify with them. They're not gonna lie. They are the government,
right.
and at that, I mean, then just rational people.
Yes. So listen, this occupied my life for about 2 months. Okay.
I bet.
So 5 days I think would have been awesome. I could have handled
Yeah.
5 days.
That's what it should have been, in my opinion. But
One thing that I can tell you, you said you love Colorado. I'm not a native Coloradan. I've only lived here for 3 years, but I can tell you.
I actually used to live in Kentucky.
Well, I can tell you, the Colorado Department of Agriculture is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So we contacted them and said, hey, can you help us out? And a fellow named Dwayne Sinning, on his own dime, called them up, talked to the district attorney, talked to the arresting officers, and talked to them about what the testing procedure needs to be, talked about how they could try and help. And it's just fantastic. The Kentucky Department of Agriculture did the same thing, to try and resolve the situation and help guide these people who, their pilot hemp program is supposed to start this year.
Right.
So trying to help guide them through it. So we had a lot of wonderful people who actually met in this process. But at the end of the day, these individuals were stuck in jail. And we still have about $750,000 of hemp that's still sitting in Alaska.
That like you said, might not even be good anymore.
Might not even be good. So,
yeah. Wow.
Anyway, so one of the things that's really important, and again, I think that Colorado and what Governor Paulus has actually signed in with the Senate Bill 240 is doing the right thing. They're going to look at the whole chain of custody, the supply chain, from taking seeds, putting them in the ground, to finished products, marketing, and banking. Okay, and I think what will happen, and what I'm hoping that'll happen, is that'll be a very proactive set of rules that other states can follow suit. Okay. Colorado does have the most experience with respect to growing, manufacturing, handling hemp, and is in a prime position to retain that leadership, even over states that may put more acreage into the ground this year.
Yeah, we've got some states growing big time, like Kentucky, which is catching up, and then we've got North Carolina coming on board, and
Tennessee, Indiana, California.
It's funny because Indiana is really a pain in the butt. I mean, a couple of years ago, they wouldn't even let CBD be sold in stores there, and now they're growing. Yeah.
Okay, but here's one of the things. So we're going to see that repeated across the states. Okay, but there, and maybe I'm just an optimist, but there's some really cool things that have happened with Indiana. So Indiana was the first state to say you've got to have a QR code on that label. It's a great idea, right? So we were sitting there talking about labels and said, okay, we've got 3 chain stores that want to carry our products. So we said, okay, we're going to make Indiana specific labels. We'll put this QR code on, so on and so forth. And then one of the people in the group said, why don't we just do that for every label? Why don't we just make that testing result available for every product, every batch? So I think there's good that comes out of something like that. And that there are different states and different regulations that we've seen that I'm hoping Colorado will adopt, and again have an integrated, comprehensive set of rules that we can live by. The thing that kills our industry is when the rules change. So if the rules change every 6 months, it's really hard to make sure that you're operating viably or incorporating other things. So, for example, if you have a label change and you've got to change all the labels, it's not just the cost of labels; it's actually pulling the existing labels off, doing product recall, very expensive, and for companies that are just starting to operate in the black, it can be devastating in terms of the cost implications.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that's where the FDA actually and the dietary supplement guidelines would be really great, because
fantastic.
we don't have the requirements for the lot and batch, and so a recall would be impossible for a lot of these manufacturers, the small batch people.
Correct.
And because I work in animal health, and so with pharmaceuticals and dietary supplements and stuff like that for the animal industry, not hemp related at all. That's my day job. So and so I work with the FDA and the EPA and et cetera, et cetera. And so I understand, the importance of being able to track things. It's really important, and that's one of the things that I think the FDA does a really great job of, because let's say you do find out that somehow there's a product out there with a solvent in it, that didn't get washed, or purged, and you need to be able to pull all that stuff back in because you don't know what it's going to do to the people, especially if someone with a compromised immune system is taking it. Heaven forbid,
Right.
we make them worse than better.
Yep.
So I love that part of the FDA involvement is the protection of the consumer, and so hopefully, the whole dietary guideline thing might be a great thing. And I've talked to a lot of people, and that's kind of what we're hoping for.
Well, again, there's three potential outcomes, right? It's either going to be a food ingredient, which is fine, okay, or a dietary supplement or a drug. If the FDA rules that this is a drug, the losers are going to be the people who need alternative treatment.
Yes.
Okay, because they're not going to have access to it any longer. It'll take 14 years to actually bring it to market.
Yeah.
And when it does come to market, they're going to be looking at $30,000-$40,000 a year in terms of their dietary supplement.
Yep, that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what Epidiolex has come out on the market on. We can make the exact same product, maybe even a little bit better, for 1/10 the cost.
Yeah.
And still be happy with that price, and everything's good.
Exactly. So, one of the things that Panacea Life does is, and this is a great thing that is so cannabis specific, is you formulate to a specific condition, in people. And,
well, and animals, right?
oh, and animals.
So our first round of products have been more generic CBD products. Okay. And now what we started to do is take a look at other natural supplements we can combine with that to get to augment effects. So probably the best case I can give to you right now is our canine product. So it's not a people product, a canine product.
The cannabidiol is cannabidiol.
Well, I mean, so the cool thing is when you take a look at dogs, there's no placebo effect. They don't know what they've been given. They either feel better or they don't, right?
And there was that Cornell study, that
sponsored by LVET, yeah. By the way, that study has way too high a dose.
Oh, okay.
You don't need that high of a dose to actually see effects. So we actually conducted. We got together different veterinarians across the nation.
Nice.
And we gave them our product, which again is a soft gel that has fish oil and 5 milligrams of CBD in it. Okay. And we said, give this to your patients. Let's assess their pain, their movement disorders, and I'll send you the paper. So we wrote it up as a white paper. It's more of, I look at it as more of a foundation study, again, to convince my board that we need to spend more money to go back and do the study over again. But a 5 milligram dose, regardless of dog body weight.
Really?
5 milligrams.
Regardless of dog body weight.
Regardless of dog body weight, we saw a 35% improvement overall through 10 different measures of pain assessment.
Nice.
Could the dog, so some dogs couldn't get up. They'd be lying on the ground. They couldn't get up on their own. And literally by taking this material, about 10 minutes later, they're able to get up. They're able to climb the stairs. They're able to get into a car. Okay. And so CBD for dogs, just from that movement disorder piece, extraordinarily effective, better than Cosequin, Dasequin, which takes 6 months, and you don't know if it's going to work or not, right?
Right.
We added in the fish oil, so to come back to where I was getting on this, because fish oil has a lot of really good beneficial properties in dogs, both for anti-inflammation as well as healthy coat, things of that nature. And so the omega fatty acids in the fish oil really help the animals out as well.
Nice.
So that's a foundation study we want to go back to and do dose ranging and take a look at some more objective measures. But one of the unexpected things we found in that study is that the owners were reporting their dogs were calmer.
Yeah.
So when you think about that little yapper dog, okay, or a dog that has social anxiety, or a dog on 4th of July who is shivering because of fireworks, okay, what we saw with this, and again, it's giving us the foundation to go back and do the study in a more controlled fashion, is that we saw an overall calming effect. And again, this is just a 5 milligram dose, okay? So when you think about it, it's about 1 milligram CBD for every 10 pounds is an effective dose of this material. When it's applied, so we make this as a little fish, soft gel, twist the tail off, squirt it in the mouth.
Oh, nice.
And the dogs think it's a treat. They love it. And that's the best way to get CBD in the system. Now, the LVET study went a lot higher than what we're talking about. Okay, so I think they were about 8 milligrams per kilogram.
Okay.
Okay, so it's about 5 to 6 fold higher than that. You don't need that high amount. It's not going to hurt your dog. It's going to hurt your wallet. But from that standpoint, that's what I was talking about at the top of this discussion about the need to actually have better dosing recommendations for people.
But and going back to that, it's my understanding that if you really go into dosing, that's kind of when the FDA steps in and says,
not necessarily. Think about it. So look at the back of your vitamin bottle. Right?
But that's a dietary supplement.
Dietary supplement. But how did they actually determine what those international units or what the recommended daily dose is? Right? And that's where we need to get to. What's the recommended daily dose of CBD?
We do need to get to that. And so how are we going to get to that?
Well, again, it comes back to doing controlled clinical studies. And you can do that with dietary supplements. You don't have to be a drug to go to perform clinical trials. Okay? There are things that would make it much more helpful and to get to be much more widely adopted. So, for example, if the American Medical Association would sign off on some of these tests, so that way a doctor, when you walk in, could say, you know what, Don, I see that your hands, you've been typing all day, your hands look a little sore. I need to give you an injection that's going to cost you $10,000. You can take over-the-counter medications, which may give you ulcers. Or, I just have seen this study that actually, this cannabidiol stuff looks like it may be just perfect for you. It's safe. Here's the dose you need to do. It's affordable. And give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
And so right now, doctors need the blessing of the American Medical Association, the state boards, and the FDA, so they can actually talk to their patients about this stuff. So until we get those studies to get to what the recommended doses are, to get more acceptance in the medical community, because doctors don't want to lose their license, their ability to practice, right? So I convoluted the issue a little bit, but those are the type of issues that we're going to be facing, even when we get a really nicely controlled design study conducted with meaningful results. We still have to get acceptance by the medical community.
Well, is it even being taught in the medical schools yet?
I don't know.
System.
I haven't gone to med school I never went to med school. But I do know that both in the pharmacology and biochemistry world, that the endocannabinoid system is being taught.
Good.
I don't know if that's the case in medical school.
I know that it's available in CEUs, in the continuing education units. I do know that there are certified CEU courses for nurses and doctors.
You mean CMEs?
They call them CEUs.
So
maybe it was CME, but my sister's an RN BSN, and so one of her courses that she took for her to keep her license active was a cannabis one. So
I've gone to a couple of CME sessions. Matter of fact, they had one in Denver.
Oh, did you do the Colorado Cannabis Clinician one?
No, I can't remember. I can't remember what the trade show was called, but so it was combination trade show and CME. And so they had Alan Shackelford gave a presentation.
I love Alan Shackelford. He was my cannabis doctor a decade ago.
He filled the house. I mean, that's what everybody came to see, right? So
he's amazing.
And they had Dr. Mora, and they had some really good presentations, but they're almost like one-offs. They're not really they're more about patient stories and about what they saw with a dedicated treatment regimen with that particular patient.
The ones that I have talked to people about are actual talking about contraindications, and things like that. They're very, it's really not about patient stories. It's more about the nuts and bolts.
And that's great, and that's what we need. Now, I don't have the type of national experience on that particular aspect of education. The only thing I'm taking a look at is what's coming out in the literature, who's doing the clinical studies, taking a look at the FDA site for clinical studies, and then trying to glean that into useful information that we can relay out to our customer base, or use that for product improvements for, again, getting
for your
better
product.
medications.
Yeah,
Right.
to help that many more people.
Correct.
So now, does your website have any of these resources on it? Maybe white
No,
papers or?
no. So this is one of the tricky things, right? So we talk about the FDA warning letters,
Yeah.
right? And so we've got to be very careful about what we put on the website.
Exactly.
Since we commercialize product on our website, we've got to be very careful. We do have a nonprofit site that has no linkage that you can see to our company called CBD Hemp Sciences.
Good,
and
that's why CBD Talk Podcast is here also, because
Yeah.
it's not linked to
a commercial entity,
Yeah,
right?
it's about the knowledge.
And so that one actually compiles a lot of PubMed articles and groups by specific indications that people might be looking to try and solve.
And what is that? Because I'm going to put that in the show notes again. What's that site?
Sure. It's Hemp CBD Sciences.
Hemp CBDsciences.com?
.com, yeah.
Okay, so in the show notes, we will have the website to Panacea,
Okay.
PanaceaLife.com, right?
Correct.
And then we'll have the resources website available there. So you guys can just go to the show notes either on YouTube or iTunes or Google Play or wherever your Spotify, wherever you're listening to this on. And if there are show notes there, you will have the link there so that you can go directly to those. Because for the science that is available, take advantage of it. Read it and learn something. That's what it's all about. So.
Yeah, and Don, I'll send you the two papers I talked about with respect to the canine study, the equine study.
Okay.
So
Cool.
you can take a
One
look
of them
at
was
those.
equine.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that one either.
Tell me a little bit about that real quick. Just real
So
quick, because I know we're taking a long time here.
No, it's okay. It's the same philosophy as the canine study. It's more of a foundation study, and because of the outcomes we saw with the dogs, we built in an anxiety arm. So as you're aware, horses are herd mentality animals. So they have a lot of social anxiety. They're separated from the herd.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a unique deal in that we had about 50 horses across the nation that we took a look at. And we did 100 milligrams per horse per day.
Okay.
And we just did, we used the Colorado State pain assessment. And then we also did an anxiety measurement. Now, the cool thing, again, it's pretty astounding. When I take a look back at it, the study was not designed the best way. So you can criticize us on not having.
Right, but that's why you duplicate it.
That's why we duplicate it. But the amazing thing is we saw, again, about 30 to 40%, 35 to 40% improvement in the sources for movement disorders. Okay, so age-related movement disorders. Okay. Now, the surprising thing is we did see marginal improvement in anxiety scores. But I think we didn't have the right dosing in order to actually see that. So we probably have to go back and actually increase the dosing to see what we actually get with respect to anxiety. But there are also other anxiety conditions, so we should be recruiting those animals based on their anxiety condition as opposed to just, take a look at movement disorders. And by the way, does this help your animal with respect to transport or stalling or...
Transport is a big
deal.
Anxiety thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So again, I can send you that paper. And again, just take it in the spirit that it's intended. They're foundation studies.
Yeah.
To either allow us to say, yes, we need to go further and actually expand the study, or, okay, nice try, let's move on to something else.
Right.
Okay.
And here's the thing that people can also think about. So you went from a dog at 5 milligrams to a horse at only 100 milligrams. That's not a huge increase when you think about the size of a dog and the size of a horse.
Well, and they also they metabolize very differently, right? So so there was a little more rationale than just saying 100 milligrams in terms of what we're taking a look at. But at the same time, one of the things that we're learning is that we need to be a little more precise in terms of grouping the animals into body weight classes, and then using that as a dosing regimen as opposed to just say, hey, here's one dose, everybody take it, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, and I see a lot of on the animal health side, like when you're talking about like cattle and things like that, how some of the farmers are starting to introduce just hemp, natural hemp, into the feed source again.
Right.
And so that's really interesting in what's coming out with respect to even with chickens, and how it's affecting the omegas and the eggs and stuff like that, the nutritional value in the eggs. And it's
Right.
it's it's like, we were doing this naturally 100 years ago, but so what's
Yeah.
old is new again.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're talking with Idaho State, or excuse me, not Idaho, but Iowa State.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And
Iowa's really coming on board.
I mean, surprisingly,
Certainly,
right? So,
yeah.
so we're speaking with both Iowa State as well as Colorado State, but Iowa State in particular for their ag, what do they call it? Food and fiber animals.
Oh,
So
okay.
chickens, pigs, cows, items of that nature. And so one of the things that they're very interested in is that they're limited with respect to pain medications they can give to pigs when they're castrating them, right?
Yep.
Or chickens as antibiotics or things of that nature. Hemp
Production
oil.
animals, they call it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And so we're waiting for the first round of proposals to start working with them on what we can actually take a look at. But the applications, as you start to think about how far this particular plant, and we're talking about a very simple plant right now,
Yeah. Easy.
because hemp is not as complex right now as marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a look at cannabinoid and terpene profile, marijuana is a lot. I'm sorry if I'm drawing that line, but
Oh, no, we're good. We're good. Yeah.
Okay. And so we're only talking about CBD here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not talking about CBG, CBC, CBDV, whatever, right?
All that. Mm-hmm.
And so with respect to that, you can start to see the range of applications that will benefit cats, dogs, pigs, chickens, humans,
Yeah.
and then the range of conditions that for humans that we might be able to ameliorate without any side effects. Okay, so I'm going to come back to when we look back on this time, this plant is going to provide us with hundreds of new medications, hundreds of new treatments that we'll all benefit from. And not just be us, it'll be other animals as well.
And we had, we never really didn't even get into the antimicrobial part of it and all of that. And, you think about all these superbugs that are popping up, with antibiotic resistance, this, that, and the other. And if we could boost our immune system naturally through things like hemp, maybe we wouldn't have to worry about it as much.
Did you read? So there's an Australian company that actually did a test tube experiment to take a look at different microbials and whether hemp oil or CBD would actually inhibit those.
Mm-hmm.
So it has nothing to do with the immune system, but what they I haven't seen the report yet. They just did a press release, and now they're going to start talking. They're going to roll it out at the national or international anti-infective whatever.
Oh, nice.
But they're seeing a direct effect on gram-positive bacteria.
Wow.
So when you think about Staph aureus, MRSA, again, I want to see what the data looks like, and then it's a test tube experiment. So then the next thing to do is, can you inhibit MRSA, for example, at a reasonable dose in vivo? And if you can do that, what you're talking about in terms of having, killing superbugs, they don't know how it does it, but if it does work and it does provide the antimicrobial, man, it could be life-changing.
It really could.
Could be life-changing.
All right, so, and we're going to have you back again another time. So.
Well, let me get some more data, but check. We're working diligently to try and get some more studies done. Some of them will be primary pharmacology, which we could talk about the endocannabinoid system at some point. It's not just CB1, CB2.
Always like to, we talk about it, but I just don't think you can talk about it enough.
Right.
Because it's so important. But
yeah, so just cycle back in about 3 months, and if you have anything else that you want to have a commentary on, let me know. I mean, it's you can tell I hate talking about this stuff.
I know, it's like pulling teeth with you, Jamie.
Yeah, well, it was earlier, just because evenings are tough for me. So I work about 14 hours a day, and then I need some time with my family.
Yeah,
otherwise they'll leave me. So.
So, parting words. What is something that you really want people to know about cannabidiol?
Wow. I thought we were going to wrap in about 10 minutes, right? No, so listen, cannabidiol has a number of wonderful potential effects that could really help benefit people's lives. I would say that the top three things that if people are suffering from pain, or if they're suffering from anxiety, or they're suffering from sleep disorders, those are the top three indications that I would look for people to explore cannabidiol as an alternative treatment to existing medications. What I would also tell people is that the industrial hemp and CBD community is working to try and get more data. But that also means that the consumers need to be very wary, and they should be very hold companies accountable for what's in the container. Ask for the batch release records. Make sure that that you're getting what you're buying. So I guess it's two messages. Is that this can be a wonderful alternative treatment for pain, anxiety, and sleep disorders. But make sure that you're buying from a trusted source, and make sure that that you're asking for the batch release records, so you know that you're getting this cannabidiol and the requested amount of cannabidiol in that particular container. I would be very wary about just taking a flat-out capsule. The best way to actually take this material is either sublingually, meaning under the tongue, or make sure that a company has explored the bioavailability with oral medications, so that you know that you're going to be getting the cannabidiol dosage in your system that's going to have an effect. Nothing is worse than to count on something to work and it doesn't work because you just don't get enough into your body.
Exactly. And we talk a lot about having relationship with the company that you're getting your CBD products from. And so do not be afraid to pick up the phone and call the company and ask questions.
Well, I think one of the things that we do is we invite people to come and visit us. Okay. So,
but you're in Golden, and if they're in Pennsylvania, that doesn't work.
Well, I mean, so one of the things we do want to do is once we're in full operation, we're operating about 50% right now due to the move and the expansion. But we'll actually create a series of videos that'll be a combination, why Panacea, but also educational about cannabidiol. But if you're in Loveland and you find some time, you should come down and take a look. And I think once you take a look, you'll understand why we're different. Okay, and why we would be the trusted source for you to actually interact with and potentially use our products.
I love it, and I will have to take you up on that. Get some time off of work and drop down there, and maybe do a Facebook Live from there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking very strongly about doing is having like monthly open houses, to where we would say from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Thursday, the last Thursday of the month. Come by. We'll give you a tour. We'll talk to you about cannabidiol. One of the things, I talked about good outcomes from bad problems. One of the things that's happened for us with this Oklahoma seizure is we're coming out of our shell. Okay, so we're becoming more active in taking a leadership position, both in terms of the science as well as the political venues, to make sure the regulations are correct. But also taking an active role in patient education. So it's very grassroots from that standpoint. So that's the reason why when you said, hey, look, let's find time to actually do this. I'm spending about 10 hours a week talking to different people on different forums about patient education, and I think it's really important. Yeah.
We need educated consumers.
Absolutely. But Don, listen, if there's anything that I can do for you, feel free to reach out, and if I can fit it into a schedule, I'll be happy to try and help.
Fabulous.
Okay.
All right, everybody. If you're looking for a good source, Panacea Life Sciences, panacealife.com. I'll put the link in there. We'll put the link in for their resource website as well. And Jamie, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. We'll definitely be seeing you again.
Love it. Call anytime.
Awesome. And everyone, just remember, stay happy and stay healthy. See you in the next episode.
Bye, Don.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.